I thank you for the opportunity to address this important conference. There is no need for NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has lived too long. Once NATO ensured peace. Today, NATO threatens peace, as NATO has become a tool for American hegemony, not an instrument for peace. In 1949, when Washington formed NATO, there were 12 members. Today, there are 29 members. And there's talk of adding the former Russian territories of Ukraine and Georgia and Colombia in South America. Clearly, Ukraine, Georgia, and Colombia are not part of the North Atlantic. NATO was formed to protect Europe from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed 28 years ago, but NATO still exists. By involving NATO in Washington's unilateral aggressions, NATO serves to disguise a war crime as a coalition of the willing. It is not the military contribution from NATO that Washington values. It is the diplomatic cover that NATO countries provide for Washington's wars. The formation of NATO launched the Cold War. As NATO was organized against the Soviet Union, it signaled that the West regarded its World War II ally as an enemy, despite the absence of any indication that Stalin intended to invade Western Europe. The Warsaw Pact was not formed until 6 years after NATO. Considering Soviet losses in World War II of 27 million people, and the devastation of the country, desperately in need of rebuilding, there was no prospect of the Soviet Union invading Western Europe. By launching the Cold War, Washington created a new industry, the military security complex, which has been earning massive profits for 70 years. The power of the military security complex is so enormous that it has been able to prevent President Trump from normalizing relations with Russia. Russia is needed as an enemy in order to justify the $1,000 billion annual budget of the military security complex, a vast sum of money that could instead be used for infrastructure, health care, and social services. The second Cold War that Washington has created is more dangerous than the first. During the Cold War of the 20th century, both sides worked to reduce tensions. Arms limitation agreements were concluded, and the leaders of the two superpowers worked to build trust. In contrast, today, tensions are very high, and suspicions have crowded out all trust. One consequence is that it is much more likely that a false alarm of an incoming missile attack, of which there were many during the 20th century Cold War, could result in nuclear Armageddon. Today, the United States faces no hostile military power, although Russia and China have substantial military capability. Neither government has the ambition of conquest or an ideology hostile to the Western world. The only dangerous state ideology in the world today is Washington's ideology of neoconservatism, which proclaims the United States to be the exceptional and indispensable nation with the right to impose its will on the world. NATO is a useful tool for Washington's control of Europe. For example, the Secretary General of NATO is a prestigious post to which Washington appoints its useful vassals. Currently, the position is held by the former Prime Minister of Norway, Jens Stoltenberg, who was and is a useful Washington puppet. The prestigious post becomes a springboard to a lucrative career in the private sector, such as large incomes from appointments to corporate boards. The rewards from being an American vassal are sufficiently high to corrupt the loyalty of European politicians to their own countries. Thus, to please Washington, Europe's political leaders have supported Washington's demonization and sanctions of Russia. By being drawn into conflict with Russia, Europe's leaders put their countries in risk of destruction. Whereas a sane and responsible European leader would strive to distance his country from Washington's aggressive stance toward Russia. Instead, they offer their countries its basis for Washington's missiles to be deployed against Russia. The greed of European politicians overcomes their responsibilities to their own countries. A mass exodus from NATO would enhance our safety. An intelligent Europe would disengage from Washington's reckless policy toward Russia. Europe's disengagement would greatly reduce the prospect of war by leaving Washington isolated if Washington continues with its aggressive approach toward Russia. If peace can be restored, vast resources could be transferred from military to social use. The world would be a better place and we would all be much more secure.